Welcome to this issue of Staffing Monthly, the industry's only digital magazine where we focus on bringing you actionable insights from the industry's thought leaders on the topics of recruiting, marketing, sales, and leadership. And as you know, this month, dedicated to the Staffing Sales Summit, we are taking a deep dive into sales. And I have gone out and got you somebody that is absolutely amazing at helping good salespeople become great salespeople, but not necessarily for the reason that you might think. There are some things that we do in our everyday life that actually hold us back. And my guest today is going to talk about how you can unlock those things and really achieve a more successful version of yourself that really will enrich all areas of your life, not just your professional career. So first and foremost, this is somebody that was introduced to me by one of our regular contributors, Shannon Kahn. So obviously comes from good referral there. But this is Casey Jacox. Casey, thank you so much for being here, part of Staffing Monthly, and I'm glad to get to know you and hear really about your experience.
Yeah, you bet, man. Well, I'm honored to be here, and definitely shout out to Shannon, who I met on this entrepreneurial journey, and then shout out to two of your sales folks will be joint sales leaders from the fantastic Davis company. They'll be there for this event, and that's how I found out about you guys. So you're doing something right because the word is getting out.
Yeah, we definitely are. We're far and wide, man, and we got to get you over here next year for sure. We'll be announcing the dates at the event, so I'll make sure on the list to get that. But you've been in the trenches. I looked at your LinkedIn. Shannon told me a little bit about you. I'm like, okay, who is this guy that amazingly I've never met? And I feel like we have parallel journeys. But you were really in some high positions at Kforce, president, client strategy, partnership. So you're really on that BD side. You know the game. You were there a long time, longer than I feel like you even look old enough to be. But you set out, you have this mission now to work with people and help them achieve a higher performing version of themselves. So talk to me about that. Like, tell me a little bit about why did you step out of staffing and take this journey? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, I read a lot, but there was at the end of my corporate career, I was running one of our largest accounts day to day, got moved into an executive role, and an absolute grind. And then that last probably 2 years, this little voice in my head said, time to go, time to go. And I was like, what? No, what are you talking about? And then I remember a couple of my clients said, and I almost would get defensive for my team because, and I mean this with all humility, one of my VPs I work with, she said, Case, when I talk to you, it's different. When I talk to other people at your company, it's not the same. And I was like, I almost got like I said, defensive because I was like, what are you talking about? And then the voice got a little bit louder and louder. And fast rewind about 7 years before that, I had this kind of vision where, you ever seen Christmas Vacation?
Absolutely.
When Griswold sees his tree in this forest and it glows.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
when I had the phrase that came to me when I was teaching people to win, it's more important to win people. We want to win relationships versus deals. I go, that's the name of the book. It was like literally Griswold moment. And so I kind of put that in the back of the head, and then fast forward at the end, really at the last month, Kforce wanted me to do something, this, like a different role. I just didn't really want to do that. And so we kind of like had a great divorce, which I was actually very grateful for, left on great terms. I have so many amazing memories of my time there, but it was time. What I'm doing now, Dan, I did not know I was going to do. I knew I just wanted to write the book. I started this podcast for dads, and I was on the sidelines for a couple of years, just, obviously through non-competes, which makes sense. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then referrals start happening, and then
Yeah.
conversations start happening. And next thing you know, I'm speaking here, I'm coaching here, which I didn't thought I would ever do, but it is a calling. And I think what I get most joy out of now is so often people are put into leadership roles that have never sold. People
Yeah.
are put into leadership roles that don't embrace humility, vulnerability, and curiosity, which I think are like superpowers that
Yeah.
change cultures, that change relationships. And so many leaders get mad at salespeople and get so KPI driven and tell them what to do, but they don't ask questions to help them see how to go and do it. And so for me, the book I wrote about is not rocket science. It's about being nice, bring energy, set expectations, be a great listener, document your CRM, check your ego, practice often, and have patience. Let relationships organically form. And I'm on a mission to help simplify that, help people have the word behind me, belief in themselves. And you talked about good to great, and then I think there's another level called elite.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So I love that, man. And I love the fact that you didn't try to fill your time during the non-compete with something else, something other work related. You did it the dad sabbatical, which I think is a really, really cool thing, especially if I'm just looking at your timeline. Your kids were probably in a very impressionable age at that point, and being able to pour into them and kind of guide them on that transitional journey. I'm guessing that was probably middle schoolish, getting into high schoolish
Yeah.
timeline. And
Seventh and fifth.
yeah, there you go. So that's it. And it's a pretty important time to be present in your kid's life. So I applaud you for that, because a lot of times the world, we get sucked up with this thought of keep working, keep working, keep working, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm gonna go find this other thing to do. And I think that's really cool that you did that. So I applaud that.
Thank you.
Definitely going to check out the book and the podcast for sure. I hadn't known that existed, so I'm going to get links on the page for anyone else that might be like me and didn't know those things were there.
Well,
'Cause
should we let them know that you're going to be a future guest?
well, not spoiler alert, now. So I'm looking forward to that, because I love talking about, family life, and that's, why we do what we do. So, um,
Most
I,
important job we got.
yeah, that's for real. That right there is the greatest title that we'll ever hold. I'm a believer in that, and it's not always easy, man. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's really hard to be a dad, to be any parent. Props to parents, which I'll save it for the show. But like, I just had an amazing experience actually going out to Ober Mountain in Tennessee with my family this past weekend snowboarding, and there's an amazing experience with the young kids that worked there that left a lasting impact on my daughters and me. And I'll share that. I'll say that for the podcast. But just want to
Okay.
get back on topic here. So
Sorry.
so you were a college QB, so obviously you played QB at, almost the highest level, not quite pro, but college is obviously elite level, and very few make it to that point. So you've been used to coaching, like you've been in systems where performance is required, coaching is necessary, and then now you're focusing on people and helping them unlock, the things that hold them back. So I want to start there. When you connect with people, leaders in sales, leaders in staffing agencies, or whatever industry, what do you find is the most common things that actually slow people down or hold them back?
Words right behind me. Belief. I think fear loves to hide inside of sales cultures. Fear loves to hide. And so I think when you unlock humility, vulnerability, and curiosity, fear rises to the top and you can get rid of it. When fear is present, ego's high. When fear is present, trust goes down. When fear is present, employee churn goes up. So for me, I start with belief, and I just ask people a simple question that one of my mentors asked me at age 41. He goes, "Case, do you believe what you do matters?" I go, "Yeah." I go, "I'm going to ask you again." He goes, "Do you truly believe what you do matters? Like you believe when you call people, you're going to help solve a problem, you're going to help make an impact on them?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Would you ever try to convince somebody to do something where only you win and they lose?" I go, "No, I never would do that." And this was when he was teaching me what a true value-based framework is. And so I go, "No, I never do it." He goes, "Of course you would." And that's called value-based selling. So when you start with belief, it just gives you some self-confidence to say, "I don't care who, I'll call the CEO of Ford or AT&T or Micro. I don't care because I believe in what I do matters and I believe in myself." Now, people might think, "Oh, that's kind of corny," or then you can sit on the sidelines and be comfortable, but you can embrace that mindset and get uncomfortable in the game and just see what it feels like to get yourself, put yourself out there, see what it feels like to maybe practice a little bit more. Most salespeople love to wing it. Most salespeople you might as well call your clients and say, "Hey, it's Casey with ABC Staffing Company. I like to show up and wing it and practice on you. You got time for me to check in?"
Yeah. I
So
honestly, man, that strikes a chord with me too, because I cannot stand that mindset. I love what you just said about belief, and I think that the people that are here listening, like, oh, that sounds corny. I think that's fear speaking, right? Because they don't want to
mhm.
let themselves be vulnerable. And so I think that you nailed that piece right there. But about salespeople showing up and winging it in this industry, and a lot of industries, but especially in staffing, because I care deeply about it. I don't think people really fully understand the value of a client, the lifetime value of a client. And I was coaching with a sales leader the other day, and I was like, tell me about your process. And I'm like, there's very little time and resources committed to the selling process outside of the meeting time. And I'm like, out of curiosity, if you land a client, what is it worth to you? And they're like, oh, well, we only work with larger enterprise employers, and if we get an account, it's probably going to bill millions of dollars a year. And it's like, and on average, how many years do your clients stay with you? And like, oh, we've got great client retention. They typically last with us like 8 years or whatever the answer was. And It's like, okay, so how many millions a year? They're like a minimum 4 million. I was like, okay, so a client is worth $32 million to you. And they're like, wow. And I go, and you're gonna wing it? Like, and like when they hit that, that perspective was like, pfft. And one of the things you were talking about that really triggered in me was like that saying that you don't rise to the occasion, you only fall to your highest level of preparation. And if you're not doing the practice, if you're not doing those things like that, that's definitely that's going to set you, it's going to slow you down.
I still practice what I do now. I practice before I go on stage. I tell a story that at the end of my corporate career where we were training 800 reps on a brand new methodology. And I love telling the story because it's easy to say, oh yeah, you were lucky, you had this long career at Kforce, and you must have just got handled those great accounts. False, brothers and sisters. That did not happen.
Yeah.
And this so I had to present in front of my executive team, present in front of my peers that I knew what I was talking about in this methodology, and I didn't practice, Dan, because I'd done it for a year. In my mind I practiced, but unconsciously I practiced, but not consciously.
Right.
Well, that I went and presented, and I mean, their guy's body language was great. The vibe in the room was great. I felt good. He goes, Case, how'd you think you did? I go, I thought I did great, Ray. I thought I did great. He's like, I mean, your body language was like you're smiling at me. I felt good. He's like, hey, Case, can I be honest with you? I go, yeah, sure, man. He goes, so what I heard about you is that you're elite and you've had an elite career here at Kforce. I was like, oh wow, thanks, man. He goes, um, I don't know how to say this, but I'm going to pass you, but that was nowhere near elite. That was at best good. Sandy, you're up next in front of everybody, dude.
Wow.
Now, but here's the choice. Do I say, F you, dude? What are you doing? Or do I say, I can't believe I just made him think that I was bigger than the team. I can't believe I just made him think that I'm bigger. And I had to sit in that pain for 6 hours. Fast forward to the end of the day, my buddies were like, hey, Jacox, you want to grab a beer at the bar? I go, I'll be right down. Never made it down from 6:30 until 10:30. I practiced day two content over and over and over and over again because that, pardon my French, mother effer was not going to say it to me the next day.
Yeah.
Next day, I got in the room, presented, fast forward the story because I know we don't have a lot of time here. And I got done. He goes, Casey, that's what elite looks like. Sandy, you're up next. And so it's like we always can get better. Every single person. And there's always another level out there.
So how do you find that time, right? Like how do you in that scenario, you obviously, you were working after hours, you skipped out on social hour with your buddies and you put that time in. But, life is busy. We have jobs, you got high quotas, you've got expectations for a number of calls, emails, meetings, clients, contracts, all that stuff, account management, territory management, all these things. How do you find the time to get the reps in?
You don't use anxiety-based language. So I created 5 swear words in my journey as an entrepreneur. And so when I think about those swear words, people think like, oh, what like? And I usually use sarcasm and build them up, but it's phrases like need to, should to, want to, have to, and can't. Man, I need to start practicing more. I need to do this. I think it goes back to just saying the word I will. And if becoming elite is what you want to do, then make it a priority. It's like if I want to get stronger, I can't go into the weight room and just stare at it. I can't just get on the treadmill and just hope it starts moving. We have to put in the work. And so I think like all you said, that's true. Like we have all those things, but those are stories that we can become victims of our own story or excuses that derail us, where I can say, yeah, I have to do all these things. I just swore. See, I will do all those things, but practice is super important. So if I don't practice how I'm going to ask that opening question, if I don't practice how I'm going to send a tight meeting recap when I get done the meeting, if I don't practice understanding what problems does our company solve, not just out of staffing, if I don't practice maybe having a tough conversation with a recruiter, you're gonna be average. And so if average is what makes you feel good, then I ask you a question. This is why I ask my clients, how would you feel? Tell me how you'd feel as if your competitors made the choice to practice and you didn't. Tell me how you feel if your competitors made the choice to be a little bit more organized today and you didn't. How would it make you feel? And usually it's a punch right to the, where,
Yeah.
and usually motivates people pretty quickly for the right type of person.
So let's think about the rep that might be in under a manager that micromanages and doesn't give them the time? How do you change that? How do you break that dynamic? Because I believe there's a lot of really good salespeople out there that they want to be elite, but the management system, maybe going back to, top producers were never really taught to be managers, but the management system doesn't allow for the reps. It just says, hey, in order to grow, we need to do more, do more, do more. And it de-emphasizes getting better, right? So how do you change that dynamic in an organization to get leadership to believe that carving out time to do the reps and practice and getting better will actually have a higher uptick or higher lift on conversion than just doing more of the same?
I wish it was an easy answer, but my first gut feel says that when you ask the right questions, I always say become like a sales custodian. Like we got to unlock the right framework, the right mindset is usually when you ask the right questions. So if we can get our leader to he or she to be thinking about what would life be like if we had reps that were prepared? What would it feel like, Mr. and Mrs. Manager, to have environments where our reps had targeted call sheets, they knew they were going to respond with objections. They knew that when you going into a meeting, how to make you feel. And you leaders probably going to say, I feel pretty good. And maybe ask more questions. Well, tell me, what do you think we can do to prepare to get better at that? So it's almost like if you kind of like reverse engineer it, ask questions to walk the manager into it's their idea. That I've seen that work before. It's not always. I mean, sometimes you might just have a bad leader who's like the biggest egomaniac, and that's a much bigger issue. But again, you don't need a leader to practice. You need yourself. Find a teammate. Find a teammate that's like-minded like you on the drive home. If you're going to the office now, or maybe after hours. Hey, man, and I don't practice doesn't need to be like a 6-hour thing. It could be a 5-minute conversation.
Yeah.
Hey, let's practice our opening script. Let's practice saying, hey, when client says this, what are you going to say? And just, and failure is a great thing to do in front of each other.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, man. I when I was running a desk and then leading a sales team years ago, one of my games, we used to gamify a little bit before gamifying things were cool, but we used to basically just have this, it was almost like a gauntlet challenge, if you will, where we would track all of the main objections that we would get, and we would know what they were, right? And we would practice, like we would say, hey, how do we respond? It's like we would basically blue sky and brainstorm different ways to respond to it based on our UVP and all that stuff. And we wanted to make sure that our people knew it, but we don't like scripts. I do not like scripted answers or scripted anything as a
Yeah.
testament to the show. But we would practice it using the core foundation of what we wanted to convey in the salesperson's language, right? But our game, what we would do is at any given time throughout the day, you would just have anybody could throw out an objection. They could just yell it in the office. They could be like, why should I choose you? And any salesperson that would have to do that, they basically would have to basically be like, they had to go right into their objection buster, like their response. And it was basically like a tip drill, and it's like, you don't know when it's going to come. You don't know what's coming your way, but you got to be ready for it at any given time to drop into it. So yeah, we used to basically do that game all the time, and salespeople would have to be able to respond on the fly. But that was how we kind of worked the reps in throughout the day, because sometimes work is busy and you still got to find the time to do it. Like if you start skipping the gym, eventually one day turns into two turns into a week turns into a month, a quarter, and then you're fat and out
Now
of
you
shape.
look like Jabba the Hutt.
So
Well,
yeah,
real quick on that, I love to
yeah,
give people like actionable advice to get
yeah,
because I always sometimes it's good word theory, but like one thing that I work and feel free to steal this too, but like sometimes leaders struggle with, well, what? Okay, we got to practice, and I don't like to use the word role play because when we say role play makes people get tense.
yeah,
I like the word practice because in
yeah,
sports, in theater, in flights, practice,
yeah,
right? And so if we're going to practice, like ask the reps, say, what are the top 2 or 3 things that make you almost freak out? Like you get nervous. Like when the client says this, you're like, what do I do? Well, if you have 6, 7 reps times three, what 18, 20 the objections right there that the manager, you have to think of them. The reps are giving you the answer. And I always like to say, when we get those objections, do we teach the reps to respond or do you ask a question? Like, hey, what's your markup? Tell me what you mean by markup.
yeah.
It's like you got to ask. I think when you ask questions, the client or the person, they're going to come to their own rescue of what they're trying to tell you. They're just trying to see how you respond.
So I love that actionable technique, and people listening definitely use that. I want to actually jump into that scenario for a second, because
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this too. I've seen ego get in the way to where sometimes salespeople are afraid to ask a simple question because they feel like it makes them look like they don't know and makes them maybe look incompetent, and they don't want to look incompetent. So like a simple thing like, hey, what's your markup? And responding with, what do you mean by markup? You know, might make them feel uncomfortable or like they don't really know what they're talking about. So have you ran into that scenario? Have you seen like that sort of dynamic of ego and incompetence or fear of
Totally.
incompetence?
You're making me laugh, dude.
So
It's
how do you coach that there, coach?
yeah. So one of my very, very favorite pieces of advice, I got at 23 years old, and I use this advice every single day in staffing. I've used it every day in marriage, which is about, I've been married for 26 years, next in like married 26 years in 9 days.
Congrats, man.
Thank you. And the leader said, Casey, do you want to be right or do you want to get what you want? And I was like, I want both. He's like, you can't. You got to pick one. I'm like, well, I want to get what I want. He's like, good answer. Because if your ego is in the way, you'd be, you'd get in your way. So I think uh, when we, you're right, it is ego. But I think the other piece of advice someone told me is this leader said, it's okay not to know every answer. It's just not okay not to do anything about it.
Right.
So when you embrace vulnerability, when you embrace that, listen, Mr. and Mrs. Client, well, let's say they torch you for like not knowing a technology.
Yeah.
I recall literally telling a manager, Mr. and Mrs. Client, my job is not to become a software developer. That's not my job. If you want me to code, this is going to be a bad application and it's not going to work. My job is to give you access to talent that you don't know where they exist. That's why I'm here. And because I believe in what I do matters, uh, are we as technical as you? No. Are we ever going to be as technical as you? No. And if that's super, super important to you, then probably we're not the right firm for you. And I think just being okay with like that and like resetting expectations with the client to make sure that he or she understands. And I found even by doing that, you kind of like, it's like an uncommon experience where they're not used to someone kind of challenging them a little bit in a nice way. But again, takes practice.
Yeah.
The markup thing, the reason I brought that up is because a lot of the work I did at the end of my career was getting into services like SOW, pro serve work. And so I think like when you use staffing based language that's very transactional, you're going to get delegated to the person you sound like.
Yeah.
When you tie the work you do to more outcomes, business problems, and not just about the person, like instead of providing developers, we provide development. Just a little word track that changes how you get viewed, and when I started doing that, then we started competing with the big boys and girls and started doing project based work.
I love that right there. So just to sum up anybody, just make sure that does not get missed. It's a subtle change in your mindset to be focusing on results, not inputs, if you will. And it could be as simple as changing vernacular verbiage. We provide development, not developers. Yes, you are providing developers that provide the development, but the client is always buying the outcome, always. They need a project to be developed. They need patient care to be provided. They need, product to be moved from a warehouse to a truck. They need the result. We provide the people, the means to the end. So if you actually speak in a way that talks about the end or the result, you're going to
Yeah.
get their attention. If you speak in the way that's like our deliverable, like our means, then it's going to sound like everybody else. So
Well,
I
I think
I
full
love that.
circle, why back to the word belief. If you believe what you do matters, like those were great what you just said. Like that, you'll ask questions like that. And then when you can say, yeah, this person, I'm there, I got goosebumps just saying this. That person is helping solve this problem. And at the end, maybe it's a person on a hospital bed that can stay alive, whatever. I don't know what it ever is, but like when you can tie it to like meaning, your level goes up.
I love that. I got one more challenge situation to throw you as we
Okay.
wind this down. And this might be a big one and it might be a TBD part two deal, but I do believe that the salesperson has to have the right belief and the right mindset in front of the customer. They have to believe that what they're doing makes a difference and that will help them elevate and ask the hard questions and stick in the conversation longer and nail the objections. However, there's another belief that has to happen in the organization. And I see a breakdown between typically in the not the full desk model, but in the dedicated sales, dedicated recruiter model, where the salespeople might not believe that their ops team or the recruiting team is going to fill the order. So sometimes you start to lose, you don't believe that you can actually deliver on the promises you're making. Have you experienced that or come across that where salespeople are reluctant to kind of show conviction in the moment because they lack belief in their team? Has that come up?
I mean, I'm laughing just to think about. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the
Yeah.
question because it's like it's it's a great question. And salespeople, I mean, as you know, in staffing, it's the blame game industry. Did my part, got my job, recruiting sucks. Well, I mean, I can think of many issues that happened to me in my staffing career. And yeah, I could easily blame people. At one point, I had aging, like accounts receivable, so far out of whack. Wasn't AR's fault, wasn't Ops's fault. It was my fault because I thought invoices just got magically sent to the right place. I wasn't asking those other questions. That's my fault. I'm a bad teammate. Once I learned that, I didn't do it on purpose, but no one taught me. And so I retaught myself. I always love asking sales and recruiting of this question. So if we get let's say that you're the recruiter and I'm the salesperson, and the client says, "Hey, Casey, web services job architect, we got an immediate need. We got to get you a chance to do this." And you're like, "Oh my God, this is fantastic." You qualify it, you get the recruiter teed up, you're trying to like get your teammate up. But let's say that you were surprised. Let's say that I was surprised, and the client said, and usually they're used to like giving me like X skill set or B skill set, whatever.
Right.
And you work your tail off and don't get it filled, then I'll go to the salesperson. I'll say, so who's we lose the deal, but whose fault is it? Sales or recruiting? And every time they say recruiting, they didn't get the job done. I go, wrong, bro. Why were you surprised? Why didn't you know your client's business? Why weren't you able to kind of like, because if you were a good teammate, this is a mindset change I had to make. If I was a good teammate, I knew where every role was coming 30, 60, 90 days out. Easy. I knew their business. I knew their roadmap. I knew the planning. Sure, was I surprised? Sometimes, yes. But when I treated my recruiters better than my clients, weird. They stayed late. Weird. They worked hard. If it was no process, like we were just submitting and hoping, well, I didn't work on those. It's not worth it. And I would, because I'm setting my teammate up for not for success. Same thing like as the quarterback. This is Uncle Rico moment, pulling dynamite here. If I tell you, I'm like, hey, Dan, run a 10-yard out, really put guy inside. Hey, but don't drop it, man. You're not used to running out routes. Don't drop it. Wow, your confidence is really high. Versus I say, hey, dude, you're the best athlete on this field. And you're going to get open and I'm going to throw you a ball. It might not be where you want it, but I know you're going to catch it. Mindset's different. Same thing I'll say this last thing before we go is one of the things that I think the biggest reason that stops people from scaling their business and staffing is they do it all by themselves. I can't let you talk to my clients. There's no way. When did you own them? Last time I heard they were your tech systems or Kforce or Apex or whoever Davis. They're like, no, you don't own them. The company owns them. So change your mindset with that one. And last time I checked, 4 ears are a lot better than two. 2 mouths are a lot better than one. And a quarterback cannot hike the ball to himself. Quarterback can't throw the ball to himself. Quarterback can't kick the ball. I mean, you need 10 of the people on the film, just like we need recruiters. When I got recruiters client facing and almost turned them into like mini account managers, that's where we scaled. And at the tail of my career, I had over 300 people on billing because it was scalable and we got people to like have an all-in mindset versus sitting back and blaming people. Because you're right, it's easy to blame, but if you change your mindset and blame yourself, watch what happens.
That's a true story, and you're right. This is a team sport, and I think a lot of times we forget it. And I appreciate that message. And one of my friends is notorious for telling me, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think a lot of times sometimes we don't like the pace that we're going, and then you get someone that breaks from the team and they call it an individual audible and they try to go fast while everyone else is going at the team pace, and it creates that dysfunction of the organization, and then the blame game starts, and then fear and all that ego gets in the way. And yeah, so well, Casey,
Individual audible. I love that phrase.
yeah, it's a real deal, man. I've seen it all too often, and I feel like you and we could chat for hours and hours, and we'll have to have you back on here. And I look forward to getting on the dad podcast and just kind of chopping it back up with you. But I'm grateful for your time today and your insight, man. You gave some heavy nuggets that I'm sure the audience is going to be benefiting from.
I hope so. It was fun. Thanks for your time.
Hey, if really quickly though, before I let you go, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, reach out to you. I know you're not going to be at the summit because of the timing of things, but if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, so just Casey Jacox. My website's just my caseyjacox.com. I had to get over just being an ego. Like that was the hard part. Like I was like, feel like an egomaniac, but My friends at Clear Edge Marketing, they're like, you got it, but that's your brand, is you.
Yeah.
So I'm over that. If you're interested in checking out the book, it is on Amazon, it's on Kindle, it's on Audible. I narrated the book myself.
Nice.
And I'll say this too, real quick. As the author of the book, I've read the book over 10 times, not because I'm an egomaniac, just through like the editing process, or if I'm working with a client, like I might read a part of it just to kind of refresh.
Yeah.
I learn from myself, which means I'm flawed just like everybody else. And I'm on this path of mastery that I'm never going to reach, but I'm going to try to get better a little bit each and every day. So if people want to check it out, I'd be honored. But if not, that's cool too.
I love it, man. Progression, not perfection. I'm gonna go get the book and check it out because I'm a reader. So you said it's on Kindle. You say Audible as well? Is this
Uh-huh.
I'm a listener, man. That's great. Actually, I prefer Audible because it helps me actually like decompress if I'm in, Dashboard University on the highway, but driving kids around, you know the deal. So,
Here you go. Not
well, cool,
anymore. They got their
man.
license.
Oh God, man. I've still got years left. I don't want to think about those days. I'm gonna live in the moment on that one. So, but listen, man, I'm grateful for your time. I'm grateful to get to know you more. And I will be following up and I'll get all these links on page so people can, connect with you and get access to your stuff and hopefully learn and get better because we're all in this together.
Love it. Good job today.
All right.